I am so excited to welcome Heather to the show today. As I read through some of the highlights of, I don't know if you can call them highlights, but through some of the things that Heather shared with me, I knew that she was in a place where telling her story could help so many other people. And so, as we start this conversation, Heather, I want you to feel completely safe and to know that, well, of course, as you watched the series, you said you cried along with me, and I cried a lot and screamed at the TV a lot and had my own emotional, journey through that. And so you can start wherever you would like to start with your story, or you can start with watching the series and how that affected you and why you are sitting here today to share your story.
Yes, you are a huge part as to why I want to share my story. I think the part of the series that touched me the most was at the end when you were finally able to tell your parents everything, and the way that you were just able to open up, and then I just I didn't get that part of my story. Well, I did get to tell my parents that part of the story, but as you know, it didn't work out as well as it did for your situation. But it was almost like I was relieved also, and I'm like, and I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for a really long time now, and I'm finally addressing my trauma. So I'm a big believer in signs from the universe, and I think that watching your show and coming to this point was no accident. Um, you just inspired me so much. I think people like you need to be the role models out there. People who are so brave to share your story and help other people too. So,
Well, thank
so yeah.
you.
So you definitely, yeah.
I really appreciate
Yeah.
that because, sometimes you don't know. Most of the time, you don't know if it touched someone, if it helps someone open up, if it helps someone understand what happened to them. And so, hearing from you and knowing that you felt that way is really, it's just really satisfying and rewarding to me. Um, I want to I want people to be able to be on the healing path, and I really feel like telling our story is sort of, step one. I think it's one of those transformational breakthroughs, and that's what my 12-step program, that's what we entitle it. Those are transformational breakthroughs, and being here to tell your story is almost the first thing that I think will transform you in a way and break through to a deeper ability to heal some of the other things that come up along the path. So thank you so much for your bravery. I know this takes
Yeah.
courage. So yes, I
Yes.
appreciate that so much.
Yes, a lot.
So, you grew up in a small town in England, right? In a middle class family.
I did.
Tell us a little bit. Paint
Yeah.
the picture for us.
So yeah, middle class family, kind of a row home, had mom and dad. Dad was an accountant. Um, Mom stopped working when she had me, so she was a homemaker. Um, like average student, I guess. Kind of a everyone knows everyone type of street in England. Um, it wasn't a great childhood. As you know, my mom had severe depression, and my dad was working a lot, so it was mostly my mom that was home with us. Um, it was tough with her. She had a lot of anger, and a lot of that was directed at me. She had written in her journal, which I sneaked a peek in it. So when I think I was 14 when I first saw her journal, that she saw a lot of herself in me, and that's why she didn't really like me very much. And reading that was devastating, and it explained why my mom was always so angry with me. She was physical with me a couple of times, hitting me. Um, yeah, so it was already a tough childhood to begin with. Um, and then the abuse started when I was 7 years old. Um, it was my neighbor. My mom was really, really good friends with his wife. They were like sisters. They even had the same birthday, same year, same birthday, everything. So they were a big influence in our life because we used to go over there so many times. Um, and she also had a daycare open for a really, really long time as well. Um, so yeah, the abuse started around 7. He would sit me on his lap, he would touch me, put his hand down my pants, up my shirt. I mean, it was very confusing, I didn't he would actually do it in front of other people too, like, kind of try and touch me as well. And, he would there were times when we were alone and he would do it as well. Um, so yeah, it started at, like, 7, it went right through until I was about maybe 12 or 13. I blocked a lot of it out. I don't think my mind's quite ready to go there yet, but, yeah, and as I mentioned to you, I also started drinking when I was around that age too. I was 7 or 8, and I was sneaking drinks of gin from we had, like, this I always think of Harry Potter, but we have, like, this cupboard under the stairs, and that's where the alcohol was, and I used to go in and help myself, and looking back, it makes me so sad and angry that, at that age, I was already trying to numb what was going on. I just look back and I talk about this a lot in therapy, but I wish I could go back to that little Heather and just hug her and give her, what she was missing, and that was love and understanding. And, 'cause I think I even said in my story, like, around the age of 8, I told my mom what was going on. I said, "Look, this is touching me, and, it's it doesn't feel right, and it feels inappropriate." And my mom was like, "Well, that's just how he jokes around." And then she left it at that. And when I think about that, if she'd have stopped at that moment and said and done something, those next few years of abuse, they never would have happened. So I think she's a massive part of the reason why he continued to do that for so long. And that's just Ugh, it just breaks my heart, being a mother now of 2 girls. I just I don't understand that at all, She's and as a mom, you're the role model, you're the protector, you're supposed to be there for your children, but, she couldn't have let me down any more than that, it was so sad, really sad. Um, the drinking actually continued, as I said in my story, I remember a time when we will go out for Sunday lunch sometimes. That's a big British thing. And I remember drinking alcohol out of everybody's glasses, like it was leftover alcohol. And I wound up getting sick and a little bit drunk. And I remember my family just laughing at me, like it was funny. But it's scary, like I started drinking at 7, it was still going on at 9 years old. And, my mom had told me that it was just the way he was kidding around. And so the abuse continued. Um, And, as I'm getting into, like, my teenage years, then I start binge eating. Um, I used to take money out of my piggy bank and go to the corner store and just, like, buy as much chocolate as I could and then binge. And, again, my mom found out and she yelled at me. She was, like, really mad, and I guess she didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't, I just liked chocolate, that's all I knew. I didn't know it was, like, another way of just kind of, like, trying to deal with the abuse. It felt like part of me maybe started to enjoy the abuse, and there was a lots of confusing feelings around that because sometimes it felt good, and I was just really ashamed as well at the same time. I just didn't understand what was going on. I started to exhibit different behaviors, apart from drinking and the binge eating. Um, I hope this isn't TMI, but it's, something that I was really ashamed of. I would actually start to urinate on the rugs, in my bedroom, and I wanna talk about this because I wanna take the shame out of it. I don't I don't wanna feel shame about that anymore. That was from talking to therapists was me trying to get control over my body, trying to have some kind of control because that had been taken away from me. and I have been reluctant to talk about that, but I will not be ashamed about it anymore. That is not my fault. That is something I was doing to survive, so I wanted to bring that out in the open and just say, there are gonna be certain behaviors that you have, and they're all part of it, and that's okay, it's
And
okay.
Heather, I really, again, I want to support you in that declaration. It was not your fault. And you will have behaviors. And sometimes those behaviors don't rear their head until you're an adult, until you're in your 40s. I had my biggest pushback when I was in my 40s and did things that are so out of character for me. So I think wanting to control the situation and to say, I'm doing this to control the situation, this is my environment. I'll do what I please here. I think that there is something, and how brave for you to say that so that other people could notice, some of the behaviors that they don't understand. Like, why would I do that? And they feel the shame when there is only one person who should feel ashamed of himself. And it was the neighbor that was abusing you and your mother who was abusing you in a different way and not protecting you.
Yeah, I mean, she figured out what I was doing when I was urinating, and she just got mad again. That was like her go-to thing, was just getting mad with me, and so, that added to the shame, like, "Oh god, I am doing this thing, and my mom's mad with me now," and, there was there was nobody there for me. Oh, well, my grandparents, I had a great relationship with my grandparents, but they didn't know anything that went on ever. That I never told them anything. But they were kinda like my safe haven. Like, I used to that was my dad's parents. I used to love staying with them because they just loved me for me. There was always just love there. I felt that so much. I didn't feel that obviously a lot at home.
What was
Um,
that like when
so
you opened your mother's journal or whatever it was where you found out what she thought of you? She had written it down. What was that like? To
yes,
have it in writing
I
it just seems like,
well,
oh,
first of all
oh,
yeah. Well, first of all, I found out that she'd been reading my journal. So which is, oh, disgusting, first of all. So it was kinda like, "You know what? I'm gonna get you back," kind of thing. So it was an act of, maybe again trying to control a situation I had no control over. So I knew where she kept it. I opened it up and I read that part, and I'm just like, my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. I just to know that I really from then on, I mean, I felt like I was the odd one out anyway. My brother was like the golden child, very intelligent, great in school. His childhood was so much different from mine. There was no anger toward him. There was just love, and there was support, and there was everything I didn't get. So a lot of times I used to lash out at him. I used to give him a really hard time. Like, I was talking to my kids the other day about it. I said, I used to, like, tell him when he was sick that he was faking it and he wanted attention, and because I was so jealous, and I had every right to be, right? Because I
absolutely.
wasn't getting any of the love that he was getting. I was yeah,
Withheld from
I was
you.
definitely the black sheep.
To have that
Yeah,
withheld,
yeah, I mean
it's so, shattering for a young person, a child, to have love withheld from them by their primary the primary people who should be hugging them, kissing them, reassuring them, comforting them, all of those things that, and to be left in a vacuum without that sort of attention, of course you would be jealous. It makes perfect sense. It's why using, the silent treatment is so damaging to children, or using I'm gonna just, ignore you. I'm not gonna hug you. I'm gonna withhold my love from you in these ways. It's so incredibly damaging. I'm really sorry. And you were 14 when you read that? Do I remember that correctly?
I was 14.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, what a tender age.
yeah,
You're trying to figure out who you are and how you fit
yes,
into the world, and you're so hungry anyway at that age for people to love you and like you and be a part of the crowd, and it is just that's heartbreaking to me too. It makes me want to cry.
it is. It's terrible, and, I say to my kids all this bad stuff happened when I was a child. The only good thing to come out of it is I'm a really great mother. I
Yay.
My kids are my absolute world. They're my world, and I would never, ever treat them the way I was treated. I will never I joke about it, but I'm breaking that cycle of shitty parenting. You know, I'm just like, I'm everything my mother wasn't because I never want them to feel the way I did ever,
Yeah,
ever, ever.
yeah.
It's
So it's interesting,
yeah.
you called that shame parenting. You're ending the cycle of
Yes.
shame parenting. I wanna say it one more
Yes, it's
time.
enough.
Heather is ending the cycle of shame child rearing. You know, you can't do
Yeah,
shaming is one of the most destructive things you could do to a child, and
it's
it's
yeah,
used all the time. Shame parenting is, like, everywhere. Man, if we could get that one message, then telling your story was like
yes,
it could change the world. So that's really
yes, I
amazing.
think so
I've
too.
never heard anybody use that phrase. That was
Yeah.
ending the cycle of shame
Yes.
parenting. So
Yeah.
I would think that if somebody had been through that, and maybe your mother had gone through something, I don't know. You didn't mention that at all.
I think so, yeah, I her dad wasn't there for her, I don't think he was even there when she was born. He was an alcoholic pretty much till the end of his life, so I know that she didn't have a great upbringing, but, you know, I can have some kinda empathy toward that. She lost her mom when I was a baby as well, so I know she had a lot of stuff going on, and I can be a human being and have as much empathy and sympathy for that situation, but that only goes so far, you know, it doesn't excuse the way she behaved. I remember, one of the times that she hit me, I remember it like it was yesterday, and it stuck with me for all these years. I think I was about 12, and I was outside hanging out with my brother, and we had, like, this really silly, like, plastic little golf set or something. So I'm out there, and I'm playing golf with him, and I leant on the stick, and I bent it, and she knocked on the window, and when she brought me inside, she slapped me across the face, and she said, "I can't believe you did." It's a golf stick, first of all. Like, I can't obviously, it wasn't about that. It was just about her being angry in the moment and just taking it out on me. So, you can see why I didn't we had a terrible relationship, terrible, especially as I got older into, like, 15, 16 years old. We clashed all the time. I mean, they didn't because I was going off the rails. By 16, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I was getting into pubs. Well, unfortunately in England, it's a big culture is drinking, which is just it's not it's terrible. So I was getting into pubs when I was 16. I was coming home late. I was, drunk most of the time. They didn't know what to they just yelled at me. I was very promiscuous at that point as well. Um, it was the only way I was looking for that love. Any attention I got, a kiss or a hug or anything else, I thought that was the way that you gave love was to have sex, so that's what I did. I was, I yeah,
Well,
I did.
it
I was
makes
very promiscuous.
complete sense, and so, I think oftentimes when we are trying to deal with trauma, from childhood abuse or rape or molestation, I think that we are having another problem that is an outcome almost of that initial um, break in our natural development. So the fact that you didn't get the right kind of love and that you didn't get any help, even though you told your mother that you didn't like being touched that way, and she says this is how he jokes around. I mean, it just turns my stomach. And then of course you would be confused, because you didn't find it funny, and of course you would feel heartbroken, because your mother didn't help. So you have all those things that are leaving. It's like stripping somebody of their clothes in the middle of, the Antarctic, and the only thing that you want is a blanket. It doesn't matter what the blanket looks like. It doesn't matter if it's used. It doesn't matter if it smells like, whatever. You just need to be warm. and that's what you were looking for, and so promiscuity is almost always something that came out of this kind of a situation. And you're drinking and becoming an alcoholic again, go back to the original thing. If we would get our global community around this problem and actually, you know, go after it, like awareness and prevention and healing for those who've been harmed, if we'd actually put our funds there, so many of these other things would drastically lessen. I just know it. So, mother's mentally ill. She's depressed. You're 16 trying to find love in all the wrong places, but you don't know any different. You don't know any better. She's always angry. She's yelling. She slaps and hits you across the face. I mean, I just, my heart just goes out to you. I am so sorry for what you went through. I I can't imagine it, to be quite honest. I mean, I can hear it and I can see it and I can feel, but I didn't have, my mother was this even-tempered, really kind, sweet person. She still is. And so, after what you read in her journal at age 14 and all of this is happening and you're falling apart, this part of you that you describe of being taken away, a part of you was taken away, a part of your soul. Can you describe what that feels like? That part of your soul. What part of your soul? What were the things that you felt like somehow
Yeah,
were
well,
gone?
I felt like that part of me died when I was, like, 7, when it started, when the molestation started, and as I got older, I just even now, I joke that I'm dead on the inside, but sometimes I feel like I am. I do. I still feel like right now I'm trying to find that part of me. I like I'm trying to find a good analogy, like water the seeds so they can grow. They've been in the shade for so long and in the dark. And I'm trying to find myself. I'm 46 years old and I I that part of me, I'm still trying to find it. I think about that young version of me all the time. I have this one picture of me. I think I'm like 5 years old and I'm sitting on a bike and looking adorable and outside of my garage, and I look at that picture and I think, "Oh, Heather, you have no idea. I wanna reach into that picture and I wanna hold her so bad," you know? And I'm trying now. I'm just trying to find that part of me that's died. I really am. It's, 'cause then as I said in my story, I was raped then when I was 17. The drinking was really bad. I went to my best friend was babysitting at the time for someone, and we were over at his house, and we were all drunk, all 3 of us, and he wanted to have sex with both of us.
This is the guy you're
And
both
so
at his
I
house
was
babysitting for.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
old?
this is not
A
the neighbor
child,
now.
a
This is
baby, a little person.
Yeah,
And this
yeah, yeah, and he was in I would say he was in his 30s. Me and my friend Melissa were 17 at the time. So we were both drunk, and he said he wanted to have sex with both of us, and I agreed, and we were having sex, and suddenly my stomach was turning. I'm like, "This is wrong. I can't do this." I said no a few times, and he didn't stop. And at the end, when it was over, he realized what he had done because he was upset and he was crying. And as I told you in the story, my friend took his side. She comforted him, she was there for him, and I was in pieces. I was destroyed again. Not only was I, molested for all these years, now this other violation. And not only the rape, but my best friend, my so-called best friend, left me alone, and I I'll never forget the next day even, like, I had hickeys on my neck, and I still get I still feel like they're there sometimes, you know what I mean? And it felt like this disgusting. I felt so ashamed of myself and disgusted, and I don't blame myself anymore, but at the time, I all I could think about was, "Well, I drank." If I go and tell someone I was raped, they're gonna bring that up, and I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell anyone because I knew if I took it to court, I was gonna be raked over the coals. They were gonna mention that I was drinking, and I knew I wouldn't. I knew I wouldn't have a case, and then, oh my gosh, this makes me sad too. I wanted afterward to be in a relationship with him. I talked to him, I'm like, I was so messed up mentally. I It's almost like Stockholm syndrome, right? I mean, it's just talking about this, I'm just like, I'm how I'm still here in one piece, I don't know.
Right.
I don't
But
know.
you are. That's the
Yeah.
miraculous side of it. You are. You are here in one piece. A little dead on the inside
Yeah.
as you were talking about some things
Yeah.
that I don't think I have some of these feelings that I've but I honestly, I don't know that that's you may be very serious about that. I have heard stories where somebody was in a state of just apathy for like years. Like I can't feel happy. I don't know how to feel happy. I don't feel it. It just doesn't happen. And this particular person was a baby that had been put in a dumpster, and then some, I don't know who, got this child out of the dumpster. And then they were on the run with the child. And, it's, he's like, I don't remember any, abuse or what you would call that. And I'm like, there's something about abandonment that even a tiny newborn baby crying and being left to cry and not being picked up and held and cooed at and loved and nurtured and touched, it stays with you even from that tiny age. It's why a lot of people don't remember, which you mentioned this and maybe can speak on this, don't remember a lot of details about their abuse. Either they were really young, but they're like, I have all these other issues that I know stem from being abused, but I don't really have the right memories. What's wrong with me? It's very common to have all of those things happen, and the emotional, the walls are built up so you don't feel things, and then it's hard to find those feelings again. I think you can, but it takes work. It really does. So maybe talk, yeah,
Yes,
tell
I'm
us a little
trying.
bit about that. It sounds like you are, and we want to hear about that. But I want to finish and keep talking about your story. So tell us what else about that kind of dead inside. Where did that lead to, after wanting a relationship with the person who raped you? This is absolutely something that happens when you don't
Yeah,
have the love you need.
I still find shame in it, though. I still have a hard time getting past that, but I keep reminding myself that I was that damaged, that I was that alone, and I had no support. I mean, if I'd have had that love and, I was talking to my kids about the other day, I'm like, I wish someone would have sat me down when I was in the middle of I dated a drug dealer too, by the way. My mom knew about that. So I got into that too. She knew he was a drug dealer. She heard through my brother that he was a drug dealer. And she's like, "Yeah, you shouldn't be doing that." And then that was like it. So that was in there too. I'm dating this guy who deals drugs. And again, looking for love, wanting to be with him, and again, that just yeah, I that it makes me sad that I was searching for love for so long, and the wrong way, but sad that that's all I knew because I wasn't taught anything else. Um, yeah, it's very it just goes from one messed up situation to another, really. I only just broke off that friendship, within the last couple of weeks because she's very toxic. She has her own situations going on, but I finally cut that off because she's very toxic. Not all her fault. She didn't have a great childhood either, but it was no good for my mental health. So yeah, I let her go finally. That took a long time because we've known each other since we were about 13. So she'd be my best friend for she knows a lot of stuff about me, that people don't.
But you knew the boundaries of what you and you obviously have had enough good counseling or read the right books, or just, you figured out that I need to have space from this kind of a person. that this is toxic for me, and you are all about your healing. And that's, okay, so you're now at this young adult almost stage of your life, gone through the drug dealer, um, and now how did you meet your ex-husband?
So at 18, we graduate high school in England when I was 16. So I went to college for 2 years, and there was this opportunity to come to America for just like a year, just to be a nanny, and I didn't know it at the time, but that was my ticket out of that place, that situation, away from those people. Um, I'm like, "Let's do it. Let's do this." So, I came over for what was supposed to be a year. It turned into more than that. I went to school for a couple of years. I'd lived in Philadelphia for about 20 some years. That's where I met my ex-husband. I actually put back when people put ads in papers for, like romantic, I put an ad in the paper and he was the first one to answer that ad. And it was really fast. We fell in love very fast. Um, we met in 99, got married in October of 2000. My visa ran out, so I had to go back to England, and I came back on a fiancé visa and married him. So, gosh, that was all that was all very fast, very fast. We fell in love very fast and, short courtship um but I do wanna talk about the first year I did come to America as well. This isn't still talking about my mother and her issues. I was having a hard time the first few months, right? I had never left England, never been out of the country ever. This is my first time, and I was moving away. So I have been calling them, and my mom actually said to me one time, "You're calling too much. You're calling too much." And I mean, what do you again, I was I look back and all of these things on their own are bad enough, but all put together over years, so I'm like, "All right." So I didn't, contact them as much anymore, and I was, drinking a lot. That I most of my 20s were drinking, but yeah, I met my husband, married him. Uh, Still, I didn't start going to counseling until my early 20s. That's when I started to kind of start to deal with everything.
And were
Um,
you guided to
but it
a
wasn't
good
very
therapist? Did you have a friend, or how did you get there? I think that would be so hard when you're so
so
alone in the world to figure that out in your
yeah.
early 20s. That's pretty incredible.
I was the family that I was staying with when I was a nanny, I told the mom, what had happened to me, and she was the one that suggested I see a therapist, and she had set that up for me. So that was a great gift. Mother, I should probably tell her that's that was a really great gift to give me. I hadn't even thought about because in England, we don't talk about our feelings. We put it under the rug and we pretend it doesn't matter. You have to keep that, what's that saying, stiff upper lip. It's ridiculous, we're not allowed to talk about anything. We have to keep those feelings pushed down. So, finally at this age, I was ready to, deal with that. So, um
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you had someone that at least said, get some, get some counseling. Get you deserve it, because a lot of times we just don't have a person in our life to say that. And especially if we're trying to look like we're fine and we start to, you know, I don't know, we can hide a lot of those things. We've gotten good at hiding and keeping a secret. And so you hide the things you don't want the public to see and other people to see. And so the fact that you knew, from that suggestion that you took her, yeah, you should go back and thank her. I mean, I don't tell people shoulds. Shoulds. Don't should on yourself. But
No, but I just thinking
that
about
would
it
be
now, yeah.
yeah,
I'm in contact with her, so on Facebook, so I'll
yeah.
definitely shoot her a note
Because
and be like,
I think that will like complete a piece of your life. And to me, there's a lot of need for completion for various pieces of the puzzle. It's like you have to put one, you put the edges together, and then you have to build like on one piece at a time, and you have to complete that piece before you can connect the picture. And so if you can complete something by going, "Oh, wow, that actually was just a really great moment of, like you mentioned, some higher power got me in that situation to get out, to get to America, to then have this experience and now go to counseling." It's a completion, and it's almost like when you complete a task or a project, you can feel good about yourself. You're like, there's still a whole lot of
Yeah.
other projects I got to go work on, but this one I feel good about. And that, I think that's important
Yeah.
for us to realize that all of these pieces of things that happened, it's not just one string of story. It's a million stories that we're putting together in 1 hour on a podcast. And obviously each one of them has their own nuance, their own tragedy, their own, you know upset, their own person or persons who hurt them. These are all very unique pieces of your puzzle. So completing a piece and being able to look at it and go, look how beautiful that little section of my puzzle looks, and relish in it. Feel good about that. uh, yeah. Anyway, that's just something that I think is important to
No, no,
admit,
I appreciate that.
to feel good about something, to feel like I accomplished something,
Yeah, really.
because it's hard.
Yeah,
It's really a hard thing to feel accomplished. We feel
yeah.
that shame happens immediately. I don't know if it's because it doesn't feel good and somehow we think we deserved it or we asked for it or whatever it is. I don't know where shame really stems from when it is like in secret and you are the one that is feeling the shame when the other person is the one doing the harm. It's so interesting to me. I'm like, what is the origin of shame? Because then that lives with you through all of these other experiences. It informs your decisions, and it makes you, like you said, you're an open book. Anybody that looks like they might love me, whether that's in sex or, even in violence, people can feel like that's something. It's attention. It makes me feel something. And so very, you've been just so open about all of this. Tell me, as you met your husband, tell me how that relationship unfolded, because you had some disappointments there, and you have a therapist, but you're still trying to find your way even right now in your 40s. Hello, that's welcome to the world of healing from trauma, especially sexual assault, abuse, and rape. So it stays with you. It's like the pain is there. You can choose, to keep healing, to pick up the hammer, or you can choose the anchor that's going to weigh you down. You have to choose. I'm going to pick up the hammer this time. I'm going to hammer this one out. So tell me about your marriage, if you don't mind sharing a little more about.
No, not at all. I feel I joke with my therapist that I married my mom. He has bipolar. He's got some mental health issues. Looking back on it, he cheated on me. We were together for 19 years. He cheated on me for most of those years. Um, I chose not to look at it in the beginning. Also, I the kids are only 21 months apart. They were little when I'm finding all this out, and I didn't have the strength to leave that relationship. I just didn't. I knew. I caught him chatting to another woman on like a Yahoo chat or something. I think it was, and I just closed it. I saw it, and I'm like, nope, 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 not ready to deal with this. Um, there were a couple times where I hacked into his email and I was being detective, but I'm laughing, but it's really not funny. I find like all these messages about this woman he was having an affair with, who had been in our house, by the way. I'd seen her, met her. All these silly love notes about wanting to be with each other and run away with each other, and I went ballistic. That wasn't the first time I caught him before, but then there was such a, as if that wasn't damaging enough. He has an anger issue too. There were a couple times where I thought he was going to hit me. He even admitted to it once that he wanted to hit me, but chose not to. Um, and then we went through this phase where he wanted to watch me have sex with other men. And he knew I was a survivor. He knew my story. He knew everything about me. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it from the get go, but I was so scared if I said no, he would leave me. So I did it. I still feel ashamed of it, disgusted. It re-traumatized me all over again. Um, I got an STD as well from it. I felt disgusting about that. Uh, when I talked to him about it later after we had separated, he admitted that he should never have done that, but it was too late. All this cheating and then suggesting this craziness. I We went to a swingers club one time, and when we were done, he yelled at me in the car because he's like, "Well, all these other women, they were more attentive to their husband and you weren't." And I just oh, it was not a good marriage. I mean, the best thing to come out of it were my children. That's really about it. And so we split about 5 years ago, and I actually had a suicide attempt not long after we split up. He broke my heart. I was damaged. It was the accumulation of just all those 19 years. I don't know, but, um, I was drinking so much that night. I was, again, back into drinking. I had taken some meds, and I reached my point. I just couldn't do it anymore. I just it felt like not just him, but everything in my life that had been so sad had come to this point, and I just didn't wanna live anymore, so, um, the same so that was the last night that I ever drank, and that was over 5 years ago. So I have been over 5 years sober now. Um, yeah, but unfortunately, I did this, and it was just me and my kids at home. So I nearly got my children taken away. CPS got involved, and they just came out to see me, talk to the kids. They knew it was just a one night thing, and that I'm convinced I had a nervous breakdown. I really think that's what happened that night. I really do. I just lost my mind. Everything's okay now, the kids are good, I'll carry that guilt though for as long as I live that I did that. I never meant to put my kids in that position.
Right.
Ugh, yeah.
And I think I really I really want to honor you for being this honest. It is so amazing to hear a story that I can relate to and that I know millions of other people will relate to. And that sense of not being alone, I had what I think was a nervous breakdown at one point in my life. And I just think the accumulation of so many things and the happy chemicals were spent, they were gone, and the pushback, the rage, the depression, the I don't want to be here anymore on the planet, I can't handle it, that is real. And so, as you work through and hopefully overcome, because I don't want you to carry around that guilt and shame for your whole life,
Oh, I
but
do.
I know,
Every day.
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I understand. And there's a good part to, I think, guilt, but there's nothing good that comes from shame. I think guilt, to know that something we did wrong was wrong, because our whole, it seems like our culture is so often just quick to say, oh, it's all good. Well, no, it isn't all good. It's not all good, and it's not all okay. And the things that happen to us, we shouldn't own the shame of that. We have to teach our culture, which really is a rape culture. We really live in a rape culture. And we basically, the justice system is, innocent until proven guilty. But with women and men that, go through this kind of thing as children, and then they're promiscuous as young adults, and then they have relationships with drug dealers, and then they, what you're talking about, and then, okay, I'm scared, I'll do it, I'll have sex with other men in front of you because I can't lose you, I can't lose the one thing that at least has some feeling of love, even though I know you cheat on me and have, 20 times, whatever. All of those things that build up, we, as the law of physics say, the law of physics says that at some point, if you push something, something will push back eventually. It's like, that's just the way it is. And we push back, and sometimes our pushback can be destructive. It can be raging. It can be so. um, almost on that brink where you could have left the planet. Your children could have been taken away. And I want all those other people who are listening to this podcast, to this woman, to know what bravery it takes to admit all of these things, to talk about these things, so that you all can benefit along with Heather in your healing process, in your ability to go, okay, how how will I ever forgive myself? And part of that letting go of the shame is not because we are looking for an excuse. It's like me letting go of my perpetrator. I let him go. I forgave him on some level. And I don't mean that in kind of the religious sense. I mean, I was in prison. And as long as he was in that prison with me, I couldn't get out. As soon as I opened the door and said, "Get out. I'm letting you go. Go on your way. I want my life back." That's when things started to change for me. When I started to find the right books, the right healing patterns and the right things to help me in not only being able to let him go, but to forgive myself for the mistakes that I made that were to some degree, maybe to a great degree, an outcome of what I had been through as a 12-year-old, you know? Because your development is arrested. You operate from a 12-year-old's point of view or a 17-year-old who's been raped point of view, or someone who's in an abusive marriage point of view. That's just what happens. And at some point it's too much. So then what? From that moment, now you just told us you've been sober for 5 years. So bring us back to that moment and then bring us forward from there.
So, so yeah, once that happened, now I associate drinking with that night that I lost my life and I lost my children, and it's not worth it to me anymore. I just want that drinking had been obviously since I was 7 years old, I was using that. So of course I was still drinking because that's how I coped with everything.
Right.
And that night, as awful as it was my wake-up call. I know that it's a cliche to say you gotta hit rock bottom before you can come back up again. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. That was my rock bottom, and I rose out of that. I ended up going to a facility for about a month, um, and I met the most amazing women there who have been through a lot of the things that I have been through, and that month was one of the best months of my life. I still talk with a couple of people that I met there. But yeah, I did that. I did go to AA, like I said, it wasn't really for me,
Mhm.
but, it did help at the time for sure. But, um, it's not worth it to me anymore. It's just not. I'm not gonna say that it's hard. It's very hard, like, even sometimes just walking through a supermarket and seeing the alcohol just right there, it's so easily accessible.
Yeah.
I just remind myself, "This is not you don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
You don't need to you don't need this." So, yeah.
So that's really the mantra that's going on in your head. You don't need this. You do want that.
Absolutely. Nope, you
So
don't need this. I immediately think of that night, and I will not go back there again. It's not worth it.
so when
Yeah.
you survived that night, when did you come out of the I mean that was a traumatic event in and of itself. That's a traumatic, experience, in just this really short period of time. How long did it take you to like come out of that to go, "Oh my gosh, I'm alive. Oh my gosh, these are my girls."
Maybe not even till, like, a year later because, at the time, I don't think I was talking to my mom. I was just talking to my dad, I think, and I actually just it still hadn't sank in for me, like, a week after it happened, I messaged my dad on Facebook and told him, "Hey, by the way, I tried to kill myself the other night." It was, like, really and he immediately called me and was very worried. That was 5 years ago. My mom still has yet to comment, call me. She had absolutely nothing to say. I haven't spoken to her in probably about 5 years. But, I was very shocked that my dad was there for me, to be to be quite honest. He hadn't really had a good, record as far as that goes. But yeah, I feel like it took about a year or so for sure to kind of be like, "Oh my god, I really did that. I survived that." I remember getting, I don't know why I did this. I went to the hospital and I got the records from that night, and I looked through as to how many for some reason, I wanted to know how many pills I'd taken. I know that's really weird, but I think because it still didn't feel real to me, you know? So when I looked in there, I'm like, I took, like, 26 Motrin, I think it was, and some Ambien and stuff, and I think my mind's trying to protect me. I don't remember anything from that night for the most part. I just remember waking up in my hospital bed, and I didn't know that I would have to go to, like, I call it purgatory, and in between, like a psych ward, but not really, like, where people go before they decide to send them to a hospital or I didn't know that was gonna happen. So, there was no beds left. I remember they shoved me into the hallway. I don't know what was going on. I have no support system here. I tried calling my mother-in-law that I'd found out that he cheated, and she's like, "Well, that's not really any of my business." So I didn't even have anything from her either. So I was absolutely on my own. I didn't have anyone. So then when they came to collect me and they were like, "Oh, yeah, you go into" I'm like, "What?" I had no idea that was happening to me. So now I'm here with no cell phone. I don't know anyone here. I don't know what's gonna happen to me next. Um, they wound up interviewing me. They actually called my husband and said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "That's not her. That was the other thing. Him and I had a massive argument that night, and he had turned his phone off. So he didn't know I had attempted suicide. Um, and there was no one for the kids to go to because he wasn't answering his phone. Thank God my neighbor was there because they would have been taken into care right then.
Wow.
So I have a lot of feelings about that too. but but yeah, it took me a while to get out of that fog for sure.
Heather, you have feelings. I just heard you say
Do
it.
I? Because I'm wondering if I do.
That's good. We've already made progress during this podcast. You're feeling things. That's good. As painful as
And then
feelings can be, they are necessary to have a
and
happy
then
life.
I wanted to say too that part of my story that I told you about, because I think this is important too. I wound up calling the police on my perpetrator, the man that molested me all those years. But it's of course because it's in England, it's complicated, right? I'm in the US now. So they said, well, first of all, you have to lodge a complaint with your local police officer in America, which I thought was kind of weird. So I did that. Um, I called the police in England and I told them what happened, who he was, where he lived, what he did to me. And and then I called my parents and I said, he was molesting me for all those years. And my mom denied any knowledge. That's just her. She knows I told her, but she denies that. Um, and they were kind of like, my mom's like, well, okay, we're gonna go so we can digest this. I'm like, okay. So we talked a couple days later and they seemed okay, right? The police went over and interviewed them, of course. My dad was mad with me because of that. He said, I didn't know anything about the molestation, so I don't know why they're asking me these questions. He was very put out by that. And then he made the comment, "Oh, well, I'm worried that, we're gonna be social pariahs, that the neighbors are gonna find out that you called the police and that he did this, and no one's gonna wanna talk to us." And I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
I didn't even know what to say at that point. And my dad was really concerned because his wife, the molester's wife, that's the only friend my mom has. And my dad's like, "Well, what's your mom gonna do now? She's not gonna have any friends or anything."
Oh my gosh. See, this is the
So I
kind of
had no
stuff that
support.
I want to run in the street and start screaming my bloody head off. I really
Right.
cannot handle that this is the rape culture that we live in, even with our own people's own children. That their
Yep.
social status is more important than their child. That who's your mom going to be friends with now? Oh, yeah, well maybe he has this one little problem. He's molesting, our child, but his wife is your mom's best friend. I mean, I literally want to scream. I am like shaking right now.
Yep. And then when I talked to her about it and, she had told me, okay, the police came over, they didn't find anything. I knew they wouldn't. They shut the daycare down, which thank God. Um, but it was too long, you know, I know it had been too long. It was more of a closure thing for me than it was anything else, and so my mom's like she called me, she said, "Yeah, I went over to them and I made friends with her again, and I apologized, and I cursed at her." I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, you probably made it up anyway. It probably didn't even happen." And that's the last time I talked to her, and that was 5 years ago, and my dad said a lot of stuff since then. I'm just done with both of them. I've cut them both out of my life. Just oh, my brother said the same thing too. My brother found out and he said I should have kept my mouth shut. So all 3 of them were against me. The only person that seemed to care, and she sent me a card, was my brother's wife. She said she was the only one that reached out to me and said, Look, I'm so sorry. We love you, and I'm so sorry this happened." I got that from nobody else apart from her. That was it. I haven't spoken to my brother since then either.
And then people argue. And then people argue. I hear a story like yours, and then people argue with me. "We don't live in a rape culture. What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, really?" And 3 out of the 3 other members of your family sided basically with the molester, not with their own flesh and blood child. I can't I just I don't get it. And yet this is
I don't either.
right? You're a mother, you love your girls, your children, you're like, I could never, do that to my children, and yet we know that this is the cycle. This is why abuse continues. Because do you think you were the only one that that guy had his
Oh,
up
no, I
and down
know.
his neck?
Well, that was the other thing too. My parents said that when I told them what happened with him, they were like, "Oh, well, one time a parent did come forward and say that maybe they touched their child, but it didn't nothing happened after that." So I'm like, "Of course, can you imagine? There were kids over there every single day. There is no way I'm the only survivor. There's no
Yeah,
way."
no way. Absolutely. And that is where, those statistics that the FBI says that a molester is going to molest 30 to 70, and that's on the low end. That's just the ones that we'll find out about over the course of their life. If somebody reports and people come forward. And how would you I mean, you reported with no support. I mean, you're a miracle, Heather. People who have support, who have maybe a loving partner, or they have, a child that now is in their 20s and they're going to go to school to become a therapist or a social worker. They're like, "You need to report this, mom." I mean, do you know what I'm saying? It's like the younger generation is more likely to be the ones who will solve this problem, but we who have experienced all of this have to talk. We have to tell our stories. People have to hear them, and people want to turn away and brush it under the rug, like you said, is the culture in England or London or wherever, that's what they do. They don't want to talk about nasty things, as if you're nasty, as if the child was somehow nasty. And it's like people would rather talk about murder than they would rape. That is a rape culture that we live in. And like I was saying before, the legal system, innocent until proven guilty, but with women and children of rape, it feels like it's completely the other way around. Like you're guilty until well maybe like like the way that you're interviewed, the way that you're treated, even having to go through, you know, uh, you know, how much it takes for somebody to go through and have a rape kit done, and what it feels like to be in that room. I mean, now there are in some areas, there are people that are there for you, that are to be your advocate, to be your support, to be, hold your hand, so to speak. And yet, for the vast majority of us that are over the age of probably 35 or 40, there was no one there. We didn't even know how to say the right words. We didn't know who to talk to. We didn't have any idea. I wish I would have known, when I started speaking out in my mid 30s, really talking more about my story, just in small groups, never on purpose, never thinking I would have a documentary or a series or a book, all the things that I've been able to do with this story, never thinking it would even go viral, never thinking anyone would care. Maybe a few people, maybe it would help a few people. I had no idea. And yet I look at all of those things that have happened, in my life in telling my story, and I'm like, I didn't know that even though the statute of limitations had passed in my case, that if I would have reported, even though it wouldn't have ever helped me, even if I had wanted to ask, or maybe the state, said we're going to move forward. It's not like a person presses charges. They report a crime and then the state or the feds or whoever decides to prosecute, right? And to that there's enough evidence or enough whatever. But just having, if I'd have reported the person's name and I would have called the police department, it would have sat in a file. There were women and girls, I mean, they were all little girls who are now women after me. I didn't know to do that. So some of those girls that were then, molested and raped by this same man, if I would have known at age 35, 20 years later, he was still doing it. That's what freaks me out and makes me so crazy when people are like, "Oh, well, we're going to be social pariahs." Oh, I should never
I
have said
couldn't believe
anything.
it. Oh my God.
Oh, I can't believe it either. I just hope that my outrage makes you feel good because it makes me.
It does. It's not just me, 'cause I've said that to my therapist over and over again. I just don't understand it at all. I mean, I can't. I just That's why I cut them out of my life. I don't want that toxicity around me anymore. And it's sad they don't know my kids at this point. They don't make an effort to try and get into contact with them. That's my kids' fault. My dad said, "Well, they never call us." So, but I'm like, "Well, you know what? It's your loss." Because my kids they're amazing, and they know my story too. I have My oldest is 19, and she's going to be a social worker because she wants to help people like us.
There you go.
And
You're
that
who I
makes
was
my
talking
heart
about.
so
Your family is exactly who I was just talking about, and I didn't even realize that. I didn't
Yes,
know that part. That was not a setup. That was not an
yes.
assumption. It wasn't that. Wow.
Yes.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
So your oldest is
yeah,
going to be a social worker. Okay.
yes.
This is like a
Yes.
full circle. Hey, tell me more. Tell me
Yeah.
more about how you've gotten through these last 5 years and where you're at now and what the journey of
Oh
healing
my
that you're
gosh.
on. Tell me about it a little bit more. Tell me about
Okay.
your they child, your they them child.
Yes, yes, Molly is 17, Hope is 19. Like I said, Hope's going to school to be a social worker. Molly loves animals, wants to be a marine biologist. I was at home with them for a long time. They are a product of me. They are empathetic, they're sympathetic, they're absolutely beautiful human beings. I couldn't be more prouder, and I'm so glad that they're in my life. I tell her the story all the time that when I was 13 years old, I remember saying to my best friend, "If I have a girl, I'm going to name her Hope." And the universe heard and brought me Hope. And then Molly's named after my grandmother, who I love dearly. Love, I'm so
Oh,
close to her. So
that just makes
a little
me
bit of
cry.
Molly. uh,
That is
They're just the
so,
lights.
so beautiful.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I
yeah. So they've helped. They have mental health issues. We are open about everything. They can come to me and talk about whatever it is they need to talk about, because I know how important that is as a person that does struggle with mental health. They both have therapists, they're on meds, they're getting all that help now that I never had, because I want them to go into adulthood and not have to have these things hanging around them, and be able to talk about them. And, so my kids absolutely help for sure. I've been in therapy. I've been with this therapist for about 3 years now. And I know it's controversial, but I've started ketamine treatment. I know it's kind of a new thing.
I'm very interested in
Um,
that. I wanna hear how that goes over
yeah.
time because I've heard
So,
great things can happen with
yeah,
ketamine treatment.
I had it the last 3 months of 2021. I had it for the first time. It changed my life. I was the happiest I've ever been. The depression lifted because it seems like I have medication-resistant depression, so I have a bit of a harder time with it. So you get, like, 2 shots every week, you close your eyes, and what happens with me is I know it's different for every person, but images will pass by you, like, the other day I got images from home because I'm trying to process my trauma. So a lot of that is coming up right now. These images are coming up, and then right after I have a therapy session, so then we can talk about whatever comes up with those images. So it's kind of retraining my brain, and it's helping me because I have severe PTSD as well, so it's helping with that and the depression. I can't say enough good things about it. I think everyone
Oh.
should try it. It's really
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm very interested in that, and I've actually gone so far as to call, but never have I been able to find either the time or the whatever to do it. But I have heard such good things. I really hope that continues to really open things up and work for you. And one of the things that when you were talking about that came to mind is that before it's interesting because we we have psychopharmaceuticals, things to help us with mental health, and some people really either they look down on that, or other people they use that almost to the point where they can't actually deal with their trauma because they can't feel anything. They it can be almost like too much or not at all, or it's really interesting the where it's gone. And I read something where it said that low income, children from very low income households, that they are prescribed the most medication out of anyone. And in the world of depression or anxiety or all of those kinds of things, those sort of medications. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because they don't have access, because it's too expensive to access therapy, to access EMDR treatments, to access some of the things that they can't access. So they are just writing so many prescriptions. I thought that was an interesting and kind of a sad truth, because I really feel like, again, that funding for healing has to become available, because that's to me where the break happened, and where so many of these other things that you have gone through. PTSD is another thing. When it was first brought up as a treatment for combat veterans, and like as a thing, not a treatment, but as a, this is what's happening. They're having this post traumatic stress, and it's it just keeps them in this place, and they basically went, no, that isn't true. That's not real. Well, 9 years later, everything started to be, all of the therapies and the modalities around healing for combat veterans was centered around PTSD. And
Yes,
we as
finally, and I
victims
feel
have
like
PTSD, only our enemy is someone close to us,
yeah,
the best friend, the neighbor,
absolutely.
the parent, the family member, the preacher,
Yeah,
the school teacher. It's someone close to us. So our
yep,
enemy is a caretaker. If you're a combat
yep,
veteran, at least you know who the enemy is. For
absolutely.
us, it's like the person that's supposed to nurture and care. It's just
Yeah,
so, and the same exact outcomes of what a combat veteran, for every one of them, there's 20 children that are abused.
yeah,
I mean, it's huge numbers that have
yeah,
PTSD and no one to turn to.
yeah.
You're remarkable, Heather.
Thank
Are there
you.
anything else you want to say before we end this interview? I'm starting to cough. I'm sorry.
Um, I just hope in sharing my story that I can give hope to other people that yes, it's been hard and it continues to be hard on a daily basis, but there is some relief there. Um, there is. I'm finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm finally getting proper care. It's taken me a long time to get to this point, but it's not hopeless. It really isn't. I mean, and I'm doing this with minimum support too. I don't have family. I have my kiddos, of course, but it's doable. It really is. Yeah.
Those are wonderful parting words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat.
I'm
I need a
sorry.
glass of
I know I've
water,
been
and I
talking
don't
a
have
while.
one sitting right here. Those are words of real, true, hard-earned wisdom, and
Yes. Yes.
you've earned you've earned the right to have that wisdom, and you certainly deserve to have things unfold for you and for your children. I'm so
Yeah.
just feel this huge amount of like proud of you. I'm so proud of
Thank
her
you.
because I was lucky enough to have so much support and you've had
Yeah.
none. And yet here you are. You're creating what you didn't have. You are a creator.
Yes.
You are a creator.
Yes.
I mean, that's
Thank you
I don't
so
know,
much
does
for
it
letting
get
me
any
share.
better than that? That doesn't the higher power doesn't get any better than being a creator. You are creating
Yeah.
and stopping the cycle of abuse by getting help,
Yeah.
getting on your healing journey. I'm going to invite you to be a member of our Thrivivors community.
Yes, I will.
I want you to
I
come
will.
there. I've got a program that I've developed that has clinical and science-backed reasoning behind these. It's basically a 12-step program, but it's not, of course, it's not the same as AA, but it's transformational breakthroughs. And this is the first one, telling your story. It's the first transformational breakthrough.
Thank
That
you so much. And again, can I just say that you inspire me. You inspire me so much. Your story, it just, oh my God, it moved me so much. It really did. And I'm so glad you're here now and you're making your way through your journey. And yeah, I'm just appreciative of you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words and for being here and being my guest on this podcast
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you, Heather. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and sharing the journey with us. Remember, healing from childhood trauma is a lifelong process, but with patience, persistence, and self-care, happiness and thriving are achievable. If you or someone you know is struggling with childhood trauma, know that you're not alone and there is help available. Please reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional for support. And be sure to join our online community, Thrivivors, for continued support and resources on your healing journey. Connect with others who understand what you're going through and find encouragement and motivation to keep moving forward. Until next time, keep spreading love, joy, and hope. Stay happy and healthy, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Childhood Trauma, Happiness, and Thriving podcast.